What if I told you that the world as you know it is about to change forever? Not tomorrow, not next year. It's happening right now as you watch this video. In January 2026, at a luxurious Swiss resort called Davos, the world's most powerful people gathered for the World Economic Forum. And what they announced sent shockwaves through the global financial system. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy. Those weren't the words of a conspiracy theorist. That was Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Commerce Secretary, speaking to the very people who built the globalization system. For 80 years, the world has operated under one set of rules, one system, one currency dominating everything. But that system is collapsing, and what replaces it will determine your financial future, your freedom, and the world your children inherit. The question isn't if this will affect you. The question is, are you prepared for what comes next? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand the four power structures fighting for control of the New World Order. You'll learn why the petrodollar is dying, and most importantly, how you can protect yourself from what's coming. Let's dive in. To understand where we're going, we need to understand how we got here. And it all starts in 1944. After World War II devastated Europe and Asia, the world's powers met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. They created a new financial system with the US dollar at its center, backed by gold. The agreement was simple. Countries would peg their currencies to the dollar, and the dollar would be convertible to gold at $35 per ounce. Why the dollar? Because at the end of World War II, the United States held over 70% of the world's gold reserves. They had the manufacturing capacity, they had the military, and they had leverage. But there was a problem. By 1971, the United States had been spending massively on the Vietnam War and domestic programs. Other countries started getting nervous. France, led by Charles de Gaulle, began exchanging their dollars for gold. They smelled weakness. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon made a shocking announcement. The United States would no longer convert dollars to gold. The Bretton Woods system was dead, but America had a backup plan. In 1973, Henry Kissinger, Nixon's Secretary of State, made a deal with Saudi Arabia. The deal was brilliant and sinister at the same time. Saudi Arabia would sell oil only in US dollars. In return, the US would provide military protection. Saudi Arabia would recycle their oil profits by buying US Treasury bonds. Soon, every major oil-producing nation followed. If you wanted to buy energy, the lifeblood of modern civilization, you needed dollars. This created what's called the petrodollar system. This wasn't just about economics. It was about power. The system worked like this. China became the factory of the world with cheap labor and mass production. Japan became the lender, keeping interest rates at zero and providing liquidity. Europe became the consumer, buying products and maintaining demand. The United States became the enforcer, using military might to ensure everyone played by the rules. The petrodollar meant the world needed dollars. The military made sure no one broke the rules. Financial institutions and central banks managed the flow of money. And if you followed the rules, you got access to capital, markets, and protection. But if you broke the rules, sanctions, regime change, war. This is what Simon Dixon, a brilliant financial analyst, calls the proof of weapons network. Power wasn't backed by gold anymore. It was backed by aircraft carriers, economic sanctions, and the world's largest military-industrial complex. If you were an American investor, this system made you rich. The S&P 500 returned an average of 10% annually. Your retirement accounts grew. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google dominated the world. But if you were a working-class American, your factory job went to China. Your wages stagnated, the middle class hollowed out. And America stopped making things, except money and technology. For 50 years, this system worked, until it didn't. Fast forward to 2026. The cracks that started appearing in 2008 are now fractures. The system is breaking. And at Davos, they admitted it. Let me show you the four power structures fighting for control of what comes next. At the very top of the global power pyramid are the asset managers, and three companies reign supreme. BlackRock manages $10 trillion. Vanguard manages $8 trillion. State Street manages $4 trillion. Together, they control over $20 trillion. That's more than the GDP of every country except the United States and China. But here's the thing. It's not their money. It's yours. It's pension funds. It's retirement accounts. It's mutual funds and ETFs. Yet they have a superpower: voting rights. When you buy an ETF, you don't vote on corporate decisions. BlackRock does. Their own data shows that in 2025, only 11% of their clients actually voted. That means BlackRock exercised voting power on behalf of 89% of shareholder votes. Think about that. BlackRock doesn't need to pass laws. They don't need to control the military. By controlling capital flows, they guide the decisions of almost every major corporation on Earth. Larry Fink, BlackRock's CEO, is not elected. He doesn't answer to voters, but he has more influence than most presidents: tokenization and fractionalization. Larry Fink has been vocal about this for years. I think the movement towards tokenization, decimalization is necessary. We would be reducing fees. We would do more democratization. What does that mean? It means putting every asset, stocks, bonds, real estate, commodities on a blockchain so they can trade 24/7, instantly, globally. It means breaking assets into smaller pieces so more people can own them. On the surface, it sounds great. Democratization of finance. But in practice, it means whoever controls the rails controls everything. And asset managers want to control both the assets and the infrastructure. Now, the banks are in a different position. They want to maintain relevance. Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, said it himself: "I'm a globalist. Banks want the old system to continue because they benefit from it. But they face a problem: disintermediation. They're being cut out. If tokenized assets can move directly between buyers and sellers on a blockchain, why do we need banks?" That's why central banks are pushing CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. At Davos 2026, Christine Lagarde, president of the European Central Bank, made a cryptic statement. "I'm not going to tell you that central banks will always be around either." Larry Fink responded, "You just said something very interesting. The banks know their power is threatened. CBDCs are their answer, programmable money that keeps them in control of the payment system." Then there's the crypto lobby. Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, wants fair competition. Americans should be able to earn more money on their money. Banks should have to compete on a level playing field. Crypto people want control over CBDCs, so they can pay you higher interest rates for holding your cash with them. This threatens bank deposits, the bank's source of power. But banks have more money, more lawyers, and more influence. The legislation is not designed to be fair, and that's how the game is played. Sovereigns are nation-state leaders who believe globalization threatens their power. They're not trying to win the globalization game. They're trying not to lose control. And their power comes from things like laws, borders, tariffs, and sometimes they're even willing to sacrifice their market for their sovereignty, their independence. They're willing to put up with some economic pain, not to lose control over industry, energy, and security. Vladimir Putin doesn't want ExxonMobil drilling Russian oil. He wants the Russian government to control it. He doesn't care if the Russian stock market underperforms the S&P 500. Xi Jinping prefers state control and long-term growth over access to Western capital. Kim Jong-un will accept economic pain to maintain absolute control. Sovereigns resist globalization because allowing transnational capital into their countries means giving up leverage. Their power comes from laws, borders, tariffs, and resource control. They're popular with their voters because they promise order, control, and obedience. Clean streets, national pride, sovereignty. The technologists, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, the tech elite, don't care about nationalism versus globalism. They care about efficiency, scale, and networks. They believe technology will eventually replace governments and institutions. But technologists are not at the top of the power structure. They're subordinate to capital flows. They can work with anyone, sovereigns, asset managers, banks, as long as they get funding, data access, and permission. Their software is transnational. It goes beyond borders. And as globalization breaks down, they actually become more powerful because everyone needs them. Financial powers push for programmable money, digital IDs, social credit scores, capital flows into technology. And tech becomes more influential, the enforcement layer. Their power comes from force, intelligence agencies, and instability. They're not subordinate to the government. They're subordinate to the financial industrial complex because it's the financial powers that dominate the government. But here's the good news. The forever war model is unwinding. The proof of weapons network can't enforce the rules anymore without starting World War III, which no one wants. Now we have a coalition of nations saying, we'll make our own system. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus new members like Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, UAE, and Indonesia. Together, they represent over 40% of the world's population and over 35% of global GDP. In January 2026, India's Reserve Bank proposed linking BRICS central bank digital currencies to bypass the dollar entirely. They're building alternative payment systems, trading in local currencies, and stockpiling gold. De-dollarization is accelerating. The dollar's share of global reserves has fallen to its lowest level in decades. Countries are selling U.S. treasuries. The perpetual demand for dollars is disappearing. And without that demand, the dollar weakens. Interest rates rise, and America's $36 trillion debt becomes unsustainable. So what does the New World Order look like? Let me paint 3 scenarios for you. The world breaks into competing blocks. The Western Bloc, US, Europe, NATO allies, dominated by asset managers, tokenized finance, CBDCs. The BRICS bloc, China, Russia, Middle East, much of Africa and South America, resource-backed currencies, gold, commodity-linked money. The tech layer, global platforms that operate across borders, AI, blockchain, social networks. Trade continues, but it's more expensive. Supply chains restructure. Capital controls return. You'll need multiple currencies for different regions. For you, this means higher inflation, slower growth, but also new opportunities in alternative assets. Central banks launch CBDCs, but corporations fight back. Governments want control. CBDCs that track every transaction, programmable limits, expiration dates. Corporations want freedom, stablecoins, tokenized assets, open blockchain networks. People choose convenience over privacy. The winner? Whoever offers the best user experience. Think of it like the VHS versus Betamax war, but for money. If CBDCs win, expect less privacy, more surveillance, government control over spending. If decentralized crypto wins, expect more freedom, but also volatility and regulatory battles. Most likely, a hybrid system where both coexist and you navigate between them depending on your needs. According to the fourth turning theory, we're in a generational crisis that occurs every 80 to 100 years. Past examples include the American Revolution from 1775 to 1783, the Civil War from 1860 to 1865, and the Great Depression and World War II from 1929 to 1946. If the pattern holds, this crisis peaks between 2026 and 2030. What triggers it? Debt collapse, currency crisis, geopolitical conflict, social upheaval. The old system is destroyed, a new system is born, institutions rebuild, and a new social order emerges. This sounds terrifying, and parts of it will be. But historically, fourth turnings also bring innovation, renewal, and opportunity for those who prepare. Let's get practical. How does this affect your money, your freedom, your future? As de-dollarization accelerates and central banks print money to manage debt, expect continued inflation. Not hyperinflation, but persistent 4 to 6% annual inflation that erodes purchasing power. Winners include hard assets like real estate, gold, Bitcoin, commodities, and productive businesses. Losers include cash, bonds, and fixed income investments. Expect more conflicts over resources, trade routes, and spheres of influence. Not necessarily World War III, but regional conflicts that disrupt supply chains. Examples include Taiwan, Middle East oil, rare earth minerals, and shipping lanes. For investors, this means diversification across geographies and asset classes. CBDCs mean governments can track every transaction, program limits, impose negative interest rates, or freeze accounts. If you value privacy, learn about Bitcoin, Monero, gold, and decentralized finance now, before the window closes. We'll see parallel financial systems emerge: traditional banking for compliance and convenience, crypto and DeFi for freedom and privacy, bartering and local currencies during crises. Smart people will have a foot in multiple systems. Crisis creates opportunity. The biggest wealth transfers happen during fourth turnings. Those who understand what's happening can position themselves accordingly. Buy assets the crowd is panic selling. Invest in infrastructure that builds the new system, like blockchain, energy, and AI. Develop skills that remain valuable regardless of the system: technology, healthcare, agriculture, security. Now let me share something most people won't tell you. I believe this has already been negotiated. What we're seeing, the headlines about Greenland, Venezuela, Ukraine, Taiwan, it's mostly theater. Geopolitical posturing for domestic audiences. The range of possible outcomes has already been pre-negotiated by the people who actually run things. Maybe not the exact script, but the general framework. Why do I think this? Because at Davos 2026, they weren't panicking. They were positioning. They were calm. They were discussing, how do we divide power in this new world order? That's not the conversation you have when everything is chaos. That's the conversation you have when the plan is already in motion. Does that mean there won't be pain? No. There will be disruption, job losses, market volatility, even conflicts. But will civilization collapse? Will we descend into Mad Max anarchy? I doubt it. The system is being reset, not destroyed. The question is, which side of the reset will you be on? So here's where we are. The 80-year-old globalization system is ending. 4 power structures are fighting for control: financial institutions, sovereigns, technologists, and military enforcement. The petrodollar is dying. BRICS nations are building alternatives. Asset managers want tokenization. Banks want CBDCs. Crypto wants freedom. And you're watching it happen in real time. The future will be multipolar, digital, fragmented, and volatile. But it will also be full of opportunity for those who prepare. So ask yourself, do you have hard assets that hold value during currency crises? Do you understand Bitcoin, gold, and real estate? Are you diversified across geographies and systems? Do you have skills that remain valuable in any economy? The New World Order isn't something to fear. It's something to understand and navigate. If you found this valuable, smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. What do you think comes next? Much of this framework comes from Simon Dixon. Link to his channel below. Go down that rabbit hole if you want your mind blown. I'll see you in the next one. Stay informed, stay prepared, and remember, in times of change, knowledge is power. Peace.